Good evening, and welcome to DTSC's first quarterly public forum of 2022. My name is Chris Trinidad, Public Participation Specialist in our Office of Environmental Equity. Meeting materials will be posted by Friday, March 11th to the quarterly public forum webpage at www.dtsc.ca.gov/public forums. By participating in this meeting, you understand it is being recorded and that you may be muted for background noise. During the question and comment portion, we will focus on answering questions related to tonight's presentation. For this evening, the chat is set up for one-way communication to provide a stationary place for us to share information with you, such as emails, live clickable links, and phone numbers. The chat text will be posted by Friday, March 11th, to the quarterly public forum webpage with the meeting materials. If you want to share a comment, feel free to use the Q&A box. Comments will be shared for everyone to view as they are posted. We thank you for your patience and understanding as we continue to learn together in this virtual space. These quarterly forums have been designed to provide our communities, stakeholders, and tribal governments updates on what the department is working on and to provide a space to share your voices and tell us your thoughts. If you missed it before, meeting materials will be posted by Friday, March 11th to the quarterly public forum webpage at www.dtsc.ca.gov/public forums. For media questions, please contact Barbara Zumwalt, Communications Officer from our Office of Communications. Her email is barbara.zumwalt@dtsc.ca.gov. We will post a link and email in the chat for you. Our mission at DTSC is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. Tonight's meeting agenda includes introductions and opening remarks, a presentation on permitting successes, a section on question and comments, a presentation on CVCI milestones, a presentation on recruitment events, another question and comments, and lastly, closing remarks. At this time, I would like to introduce our Director of DTSC, Dr. Meredith Williams, to provide opening remarks. Dr. Williams?
Thank you, Chris. Good evening. I'm very pleased that you've been able to join us. I wish we had time to share everything that's going on in the department right now, but we'll focus on some of the most exciting and impactful recent developments. In a minute, I'll talk about the recent announcement of the members of the newly created Board of Environmental Safety, marking the establishment of a long-awaited resource for our stakeholders. I'm excited to be able to tell you about the board members this evening. The passage of DTSC fiscal and governance reform through SB 158 was a big deal for DTSC, for our stakeholders, and most importantly, for the people and environment of California, especially people living in underserved communities with a heavy pollution burden. The fiscal reform brings our funding more in line with our mandates. The board is at the heart of the governance reform. DTSC has spent the last several years implementing programmatic reforms to improve the functionality and efficiency of our core services. We are not the same department that some of you came to know during our many difficult years. Our performance-driven permitting practices have resulted in stronger, more enforceable permits and near completion of all backlogged permit decisions. You'll hear more about that effort and progress this evening. Stringent and robust enforcement has led to costly actions against several major polluters. Our Safer Consumer Products program is protecting the most vulnerable Californians, workers, children, and women of color of childbearing age by regulating products from a diverse set of categories, including nail care products, laundry detergent, carpets and rugs, cleaning products, personal care products, and even automotive tires. Next month, we'll be bringing on new leadership for our Office of Environmental Equity. Ivana Casares will take over the reins of our public participation and our environmental justice and tribal affairs work. She is a strong, strategic leader to help us deepen our engagement with communities around the state. And now we're able to improve our performance even more by implementing the reforms that were passed through SB 158. The governor's $500 million Clean Up in Vulnerable Communities initiative was included in the reform to fund investigating, remediating, and empowering neighborhoods to reimagine brownfields all around the state. You'll hear an update from the leaders of this initiative tonight. The Board of Environmental Safety is a critical piece of the larger reform and will provide a means of transparency into our work. That board is responsible for determining fee rates, hearing and deciding permit appeals of our permit decisions, holding public hearings on permit and remediation decisions, and reviewing and approving DTSC's annual priorities. The implementation of the board is just another dimension of our progress and the investment that's been made in DTSC. The 5 appointees have strong track records in environmental justice and environmental protection, science, and regulatory policy. Jeannie Rizzo has been appointed as the chair of the board. From 2001 to 2018, Jeannie guided Breast Cancer Prevention Partners to adopt its mission to prevent breast cancer by eliminating exposure to toxic chemicals and radiation linked to that disease. Under her leadership as director of the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners, the organization shifted its focus toward prevention by identifying and eliminating environmental causes. It demonstrated its commitment to strong science, smart public policy, consumer education, and business accountability. Governor Newsom also appointed Sushma Dhulipala Bhatia. She has a strong and varied background in environmental science, particularly engineering and toxicology. She launched an award-winning environmental initiatives for the city of San Francisco. Currently, Sushma is head of strategy and operations, payments and partnerships at Google, where she shaped Google's Financial Services Partnership Solutions program. Prior to this role, she was a business strategist with Accenture. The third gubernatorial appointee is Alexis Strauss-Hacker. Having served for 40 years at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, including as acting regional administrator of EPA Region 9, Alexis is well-versed and experienced in the wide spectrum of issues and stakeholders involved with regulatory permitting. In addition to her position on the Board of Environmental Safety, she will also continue to serve as a governor-appointed member of the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board. The remaining board members were appointed by the legislature. Last week, the State Assembly announced selection of Lisette Ruiz. Lisette is an accomplished environmental scientist. And last August, the California Senate announced the selection of Georgette Gomez. Gomez, a former San Diego City Council member from 2016 to 2020, is a pivotal figure in the local environmental justice movement. I'm very excited about this next phase of the department, about our opportunity to work with such a talented and capable board. And we look forward to keeping you updated on the progress of the department and on the new board throughout the year. Thank you very much. Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Williams. At this time, I would like to invite Wayne Lawrenson, Permitting Division Chief, to provide us with his presentation on permitting successes. Welcome, Wayne.
Thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. My name is Wayne Lawrenson, I'm the Division Chief for Permitting at DTSC. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My updates tonight will focus on what permitting is doing to be successful. Some of you may be thinking, why should I care whether DTSC permitting is successful? In the next few slides, I hope you will see why Californians need permitting to be successful. Next slide. Californians generate over 4 billion with a B pounds of hazardous waste each year. If we average that over the 40 million Californians in the state, that works out to be about 113 pounds per person. When we change our oil, take our old equipment to an e-waste facility or discard expired cleaning agents, we generate hazardous waste. We all know used oil and old computers have to be handled differently from our other waste because they can be recycled. Recycling stations and collection events play a key role in managing Californians' hazardous wastes in a safe way. I think many of you will be surprised to know that in 2018, our biggest source of hazardous waste was universal waste, that's made up of old computers, old TVs, fluorescent lamps, thermometers, batteries. That waste stream accounted for 1/3 of the total amount of hazardous waste generated in the state. The next largest source was from contaminated soils, which represents about 1/4 of the total. And then third was from our used oil. And every other type of hazardous waste generated in California was less than 4% each. Hazardous waste is generated in all corners of the state by all of us. Next slide. All of this hazardous waste we generate has to be transported somewhere to be recycled, treated, or disposed. Californians need a safe system in place that protects them from hazardous waste from the day it's generated and stored to the day it's recycled, treated, or disposed. DTSC regulates generators, transporters, and destination facilities by setting the rules that must be followed when managing all of this hazardous waste. Next slide. This slide shows 3 pictures of some of the places that our used oil, our car batteries, our fluorescent light bulbs are taken to be recycled. And if they can't be recycled, they might end up being treated and then disposed in one of our 2 hazardous waste landfills in the state. It's easy for us to get our oil changed at a station or drop off batteries and bulbs at a collection site and forget about them as we drive away. But they do end up consolidated at sites across our great state. Californians need permitting to be successful because we need those sites where all of our stuff ends up to be safe and to protect the communities they are located in. Permitting sets the rules and conditions these sites operate under when we issue a permit, and we deny their application if they can't operate safely. Success for permitting includes making timely permit decisions, reducing the number of continued permits throughout the state, and issuing high-quality permit decisions, including denials, that protect the communities nearby. Permitting also needs to be adaptive to the changing world to be successful. Next slide. So what is permitting doing to be successful? Permitting started investing in meaningful improvements several years ago. This chart shows the result of implementing those improvements. The chart depicts the average amount of time permitting took to make permit decisions each fiscal year. Before 2014, our average time was 4.5 years. And you can see on the very left-hand side of the chart, the permits we issued in 16-17 had an average time to process of almost 5.5 years. We have been reducing the times for these decisions and actually met our goal of 2 years in fiscal year 19-20. Our average increased last fiscal year as we started making decisions on some of the older permit applications. We have shaved off years off of our processing time, years, and are performing closer to our goal of making 90% of permit decisions within 2 years. Next slide. Another thing permitting is doing to be successful is to make decisions that have been sticking around for way too long. Those older permit applications referred to in the last slide. Since May of last year, we have reduced the number of permits that have been continued for more than 5 years from 11 down to 8. And we have plans to public notice 5 more of those by the end of June, leaving only 3 decisions left. We have plans to public notice those 3 by the end of this year. It's important to make timely permit decisions so that the conditions for approval don't get outdated, financial assurances remain adequate, and current community perspectives are incorporated into the operating requirements. Next slide. Reductions in time and number of continued permits, they're important, but not nearly as important as improving the quality of the permits that we issue. This is the most important improvement permitting has made to be successful. For our application reviews, our engineers and scientists conduct more comprehensive reviews by checking every requirement, and they check them in the right manner by using guidance documents that we have developed. We include more experts in our reviews, including chemical, civil, and mechanical engineers, geologists, chemists, toxicologists, environmental scientists, and other specialized disciplines. And we include an enforcement perspective in our reviews so that compliance will not be ambiguous. Notices of deficiency are notices that we send out to applicants to let them know how their application must be revised. We are strategic with these, and we use them as tools to compel applicants to change their proposed operations to be more protective before we even make a permit decision. In most cases, we will issue a permit with many conditions, which would be like getting a driver's license or a car registration that required you to submit frequent certifications from doctors about the quality of your eyesight and your hearing, frequent testing and limitations for the exhaust from your car, or audits twice a year regarding your driving skills. Our permit conditions are comprehensive and protective. In some cases, when a facility cannot operate safely and protectively in communities, we make the decision to deny the permit application. Next slide. Next, I would like to tell you about how permitting plans to sustain success. Change takes time and commitment. We know that the only way to sustain improvements is to continuously improve, not just make a change and be done with it. Permitting has completed 12 long-term Lean Six Sigma improvements in the last 8 years, and many other short-term improvements by looking at what we do and how we can do it better. Our staff work in a culture of improvement, and we are always looking for our next most significant opportunity to improve. Next slide. Another way we plan to sustain success is to continue to build on expertise. The world is changing, and we plan to keep protecting Californians by continuing to build additional expertise from new technical staff into the reviews of permit applications, utilize experts in the surrounding communities, and gather input from the knowledge and experience from people who live near the facilities. Next slide. And one other way we plan to sustain success is to build on our ability to accurately estimate costs for closing these facilities. We've learned a lot of lessons from the past, and we are investing in new tools and processes. Next slide. But the single most important way we plan to sustain success is to listen to you. Thank you so much for attending tonight. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Wayne. Slide 20, please. For questions and comments in the Permitting Successes presentation, you can raise your hand to join the audio queue. Or if you prefer to have your questions read by me, you can use a Q&A box to type in your questions. The slide shows a few ways to access the different features. If you joined on your computer, you will see the raised hand and Q&A icons in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. If you're using the Zoom app on your smartphone, the icons will be in the toolbar as well. You may need to click on the More button if your screen is small. If you're dialing in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Using your keyboard, you can press Alt-Y to raise your hand. We will start with asking if there are any questions in the Spanish audio line. Thank you, Brittany. I will now move to participants that raised their hands. Greg Neal, please unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Mr. Neal, your line is open. Go ahead, unmute. We see your hand is lowered. We'll move to the next. Thank you.
Bonnie Klee, please ask your question. Press unmute and ask your question.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm wondering why you're in secret negotiations with Boeing on the Santa Susana Field Lab. That doesn't seem like it's protecting the community at all.
I will pause to see if any of our panelists would like to respond.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thanks very much for the question, Ms. Klee. We're in non-binding mediation with Boeing in order to make certain that we get to a final cleanup decision more quickly. We put out a public statement to that effect when we entered into the mediation so that the public knew we were doing it. They weren't secret at all.
All right.
So that's the reason for it, and those are the steps that we've done to make it transparent.
Okay. Also on the Hughes Raytheon property here in Canoga Park, it's being developed. It's now called Corporate Point, and there is no one from DTSC on that project. And I've called, and they said they haven't gotten a signature from Raytheon that they would pay. So we're like with nobody over there at all.
I'm not familiar with that, but I've jotted down a note. If we've got your contact information, I can have one of the staff from the cleanup program get back to you.
Okay. We will move on to Sally Tobin. Please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to make a comment. I live in Richmond, California, which is an environmental justice community that continues to be underserved by DTSC. In preparation for this meeting, I looked at the site mitigation and restoration program links, and several sites were listed, but I didn't see sites around San Francisco Bay. This is a major omission and probably a comment on DTSC's failure to clean up sites and to mandate that they be cleaned up thoroughly. I'm going to address the Zeneca site in Richmond as an example of DTSC's failure to protect the people of California. This is a complex Superfund qualified site. It has not been abandoned. The polluters are insured and wealthy, but are not being required to clean it up to residential standards when 4,000 residential units are being proposed. So money is not needed. DTSC backbone is needed. Another segment on your website deals with discovery and enforcement. The Zeneca site does not need to be discovered, just enforced. Even now, heavy metals and other poisons like arsenic are being washed into San Francisco Bay. The community is demanding a complete cleanup, but where is DTSC? Success Stories is another major DTSC program link. And for excellent reasons, the Zeneca site is not on that list. But without a full residential cleanup, the site will be poisoning California children for many years. And we would really like to see this situation turned around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sally. Would any one of our panelists like to respond to Sally?
Sure. I didn't hear a question there, but I can give a brief overview just in terms of the response to some of the issues for Zeneca, for example. And Ms. Tobin, if you want to contact us, we can lead you through the myriad sites that we work on in the Bay Area. But let's talk about Zeneca because it's a very, very, very difficult site, right? We made a decision, and under the statutes that apply under state law, we can only make a decision that protects people, right? So the cleanup decision that we issued at Zeneca will protect people who live on the site. And we decided to select that alternative in particular, and it was a tough decision. There's a lot of, essentially, Zeneca at one point baked rocks in order to get sulfur out of those rocks, and then they put them into a big landfill. They've treated, a vast majority of rocks too to make them basically to contain the material within the rocks in an effort to contain the material within the rocks. We were looking at a situation where if you dug up all those rocks, you would have roughly 65,000 truck trips. And it would take years and years and years, 10 years. And you'd have heavy equipment putting out diesel emissions, NOx and SOx pollution into an airshed that was already out of attainment with health-based standards. And then there was the alternative to cut off the pathway of exposure to the material left on site and to allow that area to be developed in a way that the local government had developed a plan to do. So we chose, it was a tough decision. I know that people of goodwill and even like minds in terms of wanting to protect the environment can differ, and I respect that. But in summary, those were some of the main issues that we looked at. Getting the site to a state where it's protective without having a lot of additional impacts in terms of air quality, traffic, a whole variety of other things, and getting it back into the community so that it can be used to the benefit of the people in that area.
Thank you, Grant. We will now move on to Adriana Quinones. Please unmute yourself and you may ask your question or comment.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am very concerned about the way DTSC lacks any empathy towards their communities. And I'm talking about the community of Hacienda Heights, Avocado Heights, La Puente, and North Whittier. They have, on the last community meeting, they committed to have a community meeting in person that would include AQMD and other agencies that deal with Chemetco. We were told at that time that there would be no discussion of any permits until that community meeting would be held. Well, to our surprise, you're talking about the permits without any community in-person outreach. Our communities are very disappointed because our children, our residents are being poisoned with all the toxins that come out of that company. We're talking about lead, arsenic, And we're talking about areas that have not been tested. The soil has not been tested. There's a mobile park close to Kemetco that has not been tested. I wonder how many kids have come up with health problems. I personally, my family has been affected by this. We didn't know that Kemetco was close by us, and my sister has cancer. My nephew died of cancer at age 35 when there was no history of cancer in my family. Now, the people, the family that live on the other side of town, not close to Kemetco, none of us have cancer or any health problems. So when is a QMD, when is DTSC going to start really representing the people that live in these areas? At this point, it's not acceptable to continue with the permitting process. We need to have an in-person meeting with the communities that are being affected by all these toxins. And I hope that somebody at the DTSC finally starts changing things and starts including the communities that are being affected. It's enough. I mean, how many people must die? How many people must have health problems? Do you remember what happened in Exide? How many homes were affected by this? Was it 100? Was it 1,000? Was it 10,000? We don't know at this point. And when the company went out of business, now the taxpayers have to pay for the cleanup. Do we want the same to happen here? So I hope that the leadership in the leadership in DTSC finally starts looking into representing our communities and not the companies that are making tons of money and they don't care about what happens to the residents that live in these areas. This area is predominantly Latino, working class community. So I guess it doesn't matter to you, but it does matter to us. We want a safe community. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you for your question. I invite Grant. Would you like to respond to Adriana or Wayne?
I can take this one, Chris, if I may. Adriana, thank you. Earlier, we did have a virtual meeting for Kemetco. It was virtual. I know we were looking to have an in-person meeting. We just weren't able to do that. But, potentially we might consider having another meeting when we go out with a permit decision. We haven't made a permit decision with this yet. And I just want to make clear that DTSC has an obligation to consider a permit application from anyone that submits one to us. So we have an obligation to do that. We haven't made that permit decision yet. Before we do, we would like to connect with you. We don't have to wait for the public comment period to connect with you. If you'd like to talk earlier than that, when we go out with a permit decision, we generally ask for public comments about our draft decision. Before we do that, we have an opportunity to connect with you if you would like to do so. And I can put my name and contact information in the chat if you would like. And I guess that I can't remember the other parts of your questions, but I hope that provides a little bit of answer for you.
Yeah, and I'll just build on Wayne's statement. Ms. Quinones, I'm very sorry to hear about the incidence of cancer. It really is, it's a tragic, devastating disease that affects families and communities. I do want to assure you, we have actually sampled in if you're talking about the mobile home park directly to the south and west of the facility, the cleanup program has sampled in that area. And that's in line with our mission. Our mission is to protect people. We do that by collecting data on contamination or even where contamination might be. And then where we need to clean it up to protect people, that's what we will do. We are analyzing the samples that were collected and we haven't reached a decision yet, but rest assured, we have sampled in the community. We have sampled in the mobile home park that's to the west, southwest of there, and we are reviewing the data. And if it needs to be cleaned up, we will clean it up.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, Grant. I will now move on to the Q&A box. I see Bradley Angel. I see that you have a couple questions in the Q&A box. I'd like to invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Bradley Angel, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so my question is for Dr. Meredith Williams, not for Grant Cope, with all due respect. And before I ask my question, I just need to respond, and I'll ask Dr. Williams to also respond to Mr. Cope's comments that the DTSC's so-called remedy at Seneca is safe and health protective. That is just insulting. In December, Mr. Cope committed in front of hundreds of people representing the agency that DTSC would, for the first time, consider the latest sea level rise projections and would, if necessary, as they were not used at Seneca or Treasure Island or Bayview Hunters Point, for example, would improve those remedies to actually consider science. And then that's been walked back. So and if you're not considering the latest science, please don't insult us by claiming that the remedies are health protective. That is not true. My question to Dr. Williams, and also, Wayne Lorenzen, and we do appreciate ongoing dialogue. However, talking about successful permitting when the two hazardous waste landfills in the state of California, which have been dumped on for decades, that operate on expired permits that were issued with straight up racially discriminatory English-only processes, including police intimidation. Is your idea of success just ramming through a new permit process, even without fully considering cumulative impacts? And because these communities rank very high under CalEnviroscreen, and DTSC was supposed to 3 years ago adopt regulatory criteria to consider in permitting. But you haven't adopted that criteria yet. It's in violation of SB 673. It's in violation of the Kettleman City Federal Title VI Civil Rights settlement that Green Action and El Pueblo reached with your agencies. So how can we possibly think, particularly the people of Kettleman City and Buttonwillow, that you leaving that outrageous issue out of your presentation, of claiming this is somehow great success, when two of the most vulnerable communities in the state keep getting dumped on with deadly chemicals, hundreds of diesel trucks a day spewing poison, no cumulative impact criteria in place, and very importantly, DTSC has failed to follow through on working with industry to reduce the production of hazardous waste, and does nothing about promoting safe alternative treatment technologies. So that's my question for Dr. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. May we have you respond, Dr. Williams?
Certainly. And thank you, Bradley. Thank you for making the time to join the meeting tonight. And thank you for your question. We had the chance to talk to you about the Kettleman permit in particular just a few weeks ago, and had a good chance to even explore the issues you're raising at a deeper level. Interesting. One of the phrases you referred to was about ramming through permits, and that's not what we want to do. We want to take the time. And a big part of what Wayne was trying to convey was how detailed we are in our review of any permit applications and how thorough we are in making sure that any permits that do get approved are detailed enough to ensure that they can be inspected well according to the permit, and we can enforce, and that we can keep facilities operating in compliance. But that's not really the heart of your question. Your heart of the question is, the fact that these facilities are continuing to operate. We do inspect both Kettleman and Buttonwillow on a regular basis, even while we're evaluating those permits, to ensure that they, to keep them in compliance and to provide oversight. With respect to the cumulative impacts for these communities, these are really, you are right, these are communities that have high EnviroScreen scores as an indicator of the multiple sources of pollution, whether that's pesticide drift or diesel truck traffic from I-5, a wide variety of stressors, political or pollution stressors. And I would say that, the truck traffic from the hazardous waste facilities is something that we consider as we weigh the permits and whether to renew those permits. So, you're pointing to all the issues that we are wrestling with as we make the decision. We are committed to moving those decisions along. I do want to talk about two things. You talked about the cumulative impacts regulations. We have been moving on with those. The proposed framework that we had for how to implement cumulative impacts and community vulnerability permit conditions got a lot of feedback. There was a lot of engagement, a lot of concerns were raised. It's a tough challenge. If you look around the country, almost no other states are trying to wrestle with this challenge and find a solution to how do we consider the cumulative impacts when we make these decisions about permits in vulnerable communities. So given all the complex issue feedback that we got back, we have had to go back and re-envision these regulations and make some changes, and we're working hard to make sure that we have a regulatory framework that's directly responsive to the issues that were raised. And we do have means of considering the environmental justice considerations of the Kettleman City community as we make that permit decision. That will be part of our permit decision-making process. Lastly, I want to touch on the need to reduce hazardous waste fundamentally within the state. The generation of hazardous waste, the use of toxic materials. Of course, the best way to get out of this cycle that we're in is to reduce those things. We have safer consumer products that's trying and succeeding in several cases in getting toxic chemicals out of consumer products. But that's a very deliberative process, and it's not on the scale that we're talking about. We do need a hazardous waste management plan for the state. That was one of the pivotal elements in the reform. And so resources were provided for us to begin that analysis, to make sure it gets in front of the board so that it's discussed in a very public forum, and so that alternatives for reducing hazardous waste generation and eliminating toxics throughout the state are well vetted, well considered, and so that California can finally have this roadmap that represents where we are today and how we need to move forward to reduce hazardous waste around the state. So with that, I'll go back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. We have actually Al Young. I see that you have two questions in the Q&A box. I would like to invite you to unmute yourself and ask your questions via audio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Being a volunteer for over 40 years of my life, I saw the problems and challenges of this country as well as our state and our local communities. I'm here as a member of the Clean Air Coalition, and one of the reasons why I got involved, because I have lived here over 40 years. I didn't even know that there was a lead refinery plant that was located about 4,000 feet from my home. And when I found that out, I realized now why we had this acrimonious smell and it's all these chemical smells that I used to breathe outside the house, and I went inside the house to avoid it. But I didn't realize the level of pollution that this plant has been causing the community since they've been there since 1959. So I have some comments and questions in regard to this. One of them is our community is looking and seeking for a laboratory institution to provide funds or services for fingerprinting. I really don't understand why DTSC or HUMD or any of the agencies that help there was mandated to protect the people don't use that method of determining where the pollution is actually coming from. It's a well-known process accepted by the scientific community. There are some arguments, of course, but in regard to that, it actually helps narrow down the polluter. And so I was asking, one of the questions is, does DTSC has recommendations or of an entity lab that the results would be accepted by the DTSC for the determination of the origins of the pollution in our neighborhood? And this is, of course, is targeted against Comeco because that is our current problem we have in this area, who has demonstrated continued violations since 1959. We do not want the same activity of failed state mandated agency to protect our communities, as an example of Exide debacle. DTSC was involved in that, and now the state and the people of the state of California have to pay for the cleanup. This is why we asked for this recommendation, a list of approved entities that DTSC would accept their laboratory work in regards to final determine the source of toxic material in our community and its sources. I do not want, as well as others, the same efforts that the people of California have to pay the bill for cleaning up the community pollution caused by bad actors and the nearby businesses. This business is close to GSF, a producer of food for primary reseller of McDonald's Corporation and other food distributions and producers in the area in the city of industry. And that's one comment. And then the other question is, I was able to acquire a copy of the the copy of the EPA TRI report, and want to know why DTSC had either ignored it or didn't know about it, saying that Comeco is the largest handler of toxic, hazardous waste disposal and other releases in the 91746, indicating the largest in the Western U.S. The EPA report was released in 2021. The analogy of getting a driver's license is a poor comparison, as when you have an expired license, they take your vehicle away or you cannot continue to drive a vehicle. But Comeco has been able to operate with an expired permit since 2015. Why?
Thank you for your question, Al. Would any of our panelists like to respond to Al's question?
Hi, Chris. I would like to, I can respond to the last question Al asked about the expired driver's license. There is the legislature actually set up its law that if a permit applicant submits a permit application before the expiration date of their permit, then their permit, I can't remember what the term is in the statute, but it's essentially it's continued. It's continued in effect. The enforcement provisions are continued. All of the permit conditions are continued, and the authorization to operate are continued until the department makes a decision. We're planning on making a decision before the end of summer of this year. So I know it's been a long time. This is one of those permits applications that have been sitting around for way too long. We want to get rid of that backlog, and we want to do it in a meaningful manner, considering your input in the decision. We're not ready to make that decision yet, but when we do, we will make it well known and we will open it up for public comment. I hope that answers the last part of your question.
Chris, I'd like to add on to Wayne's response. In addition to the permitting decision, we are of course, monitoring the facilities. We go out there and inspect the facility. We hold this facility accountable. As you know, we have taken the facility to court to bring them to compliance. So we continue to take enforcement action against this company to make sure they're in compliance. And that's something that we're not letting up with this facility. We're there on a regular basis to inspect this facility. And of course, we are aware of the TRI, and that's part of our consideration when we inspect the facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rizgar and Wayne. I will now move on to the next question from an anonymous attendee. How will DTSC support healthcare facilities across state so it is in alignment with federal regulations around not counting hazardous farm waste towards generator status? Would anyone like to take that question?
Yes, Chris, this is Rizgar again. Thank you for that question. I'm assuming you're talking about the pharmacy rule that the federal government came out with regulations. We have adopted portions of that pharma rule or the pharmacy rule as part of our regulations, and we're evaluating the less stringent requirements in the federal rule. We want to make sure whatever adoptions of regulations is just as stringent the current standards that we have and not less standards. So we're evaluating whether these regulations, federal regulations, are strict as California's regulations, and that's the process we're going through now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rizgar. I will now go on to a question by Libby Hyde. She asked, can DTSC provide an update on the adoption implementation of the generator improvement rule? And two, what GIR optional provisions may be adopted via the rulemaking process, i.e. allowing VSQGs to voluntarily send hazardous waste to LQGs or generator category changes as a result of episodic waste generation? Would anyone like to respond to that question?
Chris, I apologize. My speakers were going on and off. Could you repeat that question again? I lost the question on the Q&A.
No problem. No problem. It's a two-part question. One, can DTSC provide an update on the adoption implementation of the generator improvements rule? And two, what GIR optional provisions may be adopted via the rulemaking process, i.e. allowing VSQGs to voluntarily send hazardous waste to LQGs or generator category changes as a result of episodic waste generation?
Thank you for that question. This is a specific question regarding large quantity generators, whether they can manage it from offsite areas to and collect those generators. I do not have the specific response to that. I need to research that, and we will definitely provide a response to you. However, as a GIR, which is it's called Generator Improvement Rule, as a background, the federal government passed some regulations and requires the state of California, since we're authorized, to adopt these regulations. And we're looking through a two-step process. One of the first step is what's called a generator requirements that we need to adopt, and we're going through that process now. We have been working with the Department of OLA, Office of Legal. Forgot the terminology, but we're working through adopting some regulations ourselves through what's called a Section 100. The next step, we are going to go through full rulemaking process. And part of that process, we are holding webinars and consultation with the industry, with the community to see what kind of, what should be adopted part of the rulemaking process. And that's being scheduled for the early next fiscal year, starting July of this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rizgar. We do have a question from Cynthia Babbage. Her question is, how many hazardous waste permits have you denied in the past 5 years?
I can take that one, Chris.
Thank you, Wayne.
I'm not positive, but I believe it's 2. And that would be American Oil in Southern California and GEM, General Environmental Management in Rancho Cordova.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I will move on to a question from Michael Dudasco. Can you explain more about how you plan to use the local public to provide input on TSDFs? Would anyone like to respond to that question? Invite the panelists.
I can take that, I think.
Thank you, Wayne.
I'm guessing that it's related to the presentation. You know, our plan is to use more, you know, some of our scientists and our engineers and all of the other technical staff that we're hiring come from areas around the community. We want to use those people that live nearby instead of managing from remote locations. We need the perspective from the community, from our technical staff, and we also need the perspective from the community itself. So when we go out with permit decisions, we need that community perspective when we ask for public comments. And of course, we don't have to wait until then to start connecting with communities. We can speak with them before a public comment period is initiated, but those are just two of the ways that we plan to do that.
Thank you very much, Wayne. We do have a question. We have a few questions regarding SB 673 and VSP. I invite Wayne and Rizgar to provide us with an update on those.
Sure. I can take that one, Chris. SB 673. So as Meredith said, we got a lot of feedback, a lot of great feedback. And we are, I mean, it's a massive amount of feedback. We had a couple of workshops. We talked to different community groups. We put all of the comments that we received into as a kind of a note-taking thing. And when we look at comments, we really consider what to do with them. So that's where we're at right now. We're considering what to do with all of those comments. We got a lot of comments about the way that we're framing SB 673. And we're taking a good hard look at what all of those perspectives mean in our future plans and how we're going to change the way that framework looks to incorporate all of the comments that we got. We don't have a timeline right now because we're evaluating those comments, but we're expecting to have a more refined timeline by the end of this month.
And Chris, I'll respond to the VSP regulations. VSP stands for Violation Scoring Procedures. It's a tool that DTSC put into regulations to hold hazardous waste facilities accountable for their non-compliance and to make it a transparent process for so everybody, the public, could see the standing of that facility. It also holds DTSC accountable to take action against facilities. So we originally published the regulations in 2019. It's in 3 years running now. And based on feedback from the community, from the way we saw the implementation of the regulation, we're going back to revise these regulations to strengthen them. And we are anticipating to come out with a public notice of the regulations sometime this summer. And I look forward to, we'll have some workshops prior to the actual rulemaking, but definitely we are looking forward to getting the rulemaking started this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rizgar. We will now move on to the next slide, and we will try to answer more questions in the next Q&A section. To provide an overview of the Cleanup and Vulnerable Communities Initiative, we are joined by Mr. Grant Cope, Site Mitigation Restoration Program Deputy Director. Welcome, Grant.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to everybody here tonight and for your input. It's really invaluable to helping us better serve communities. I'm going to give a brief overview of the work that we do and also of the governor's initiative. First, our mission. We protect people. We clean up contamination in communities all across the state. 1 in 3 people across the state live within about a mile of a site that DTSC has worked on. And 50% of those sites are in vulnerable communities. That means their people are overburdened by pollution and vulnerable to its impacts. Now, let me talk a little bit about the governor's initiative because it's directly in line with the work that we do. The governor signed into law $500 million to fund DTSC's Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities initiative. This includes brownfield grants. This includes technical assistance grants, a site discovery and enforcement program, a workforce development program, and also a community benefits program. We are so excited, so tremendously excited by this initiative's ability. It gives us an opportunity to better serve communities. I'm going to hand it off to Greg right now, and he's going to talk about the Brownfields Grant Program. Greg?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gregory Schaefer. I am a Brownfield Coordinator here at DTSC within DTSC's Office of Brownfields. Next slide, please. Just a quick refresher. I was on one of these quarterly public forums a few quarters ago to introduce the Equitable Community Revitalization Grant, or ECRG. As a reminder, it is an approximately $250 million grant program to incentivize cleanup in environmentally burdened areas. This $250 million will be appropriated over 3 fiscal years within California, starting with this current fiscal year. The intention of the grant is to provide safe recycling of brownfields while encouraging equitable development. And the grants are available to local units of government, nonprofit organizations, and tribes. Slide 24, please. The current status, the application period is currently open, and it will be open through April of 2022, specifically April 4th. We are planning to make decisions sometime in late spring, looking closer to the May timeframe. And a future application schedule for the next round of funding will be available will be announced in summer of 2022. This current application period is approximately $70.5 million that are available. And we are also providing free technical assistance to applicants through our Brownfields technical assistance provider called the Center for Creative Land Recycling, who is also a Brownfields technical support provider for US EPA. Slide 25, please. In last fall of 2021, DTSC conducted a pre-qualifying round. What this was a test of DTSC's application portal. It was a test of DTSC's eligibility criteria for the grant. And it was also an opportunity for DTSC's program staff to understand the universe that they were entering into and to understand where our outreach had been received. So we received 88 applications requesting $143 million, again, of the $70.5 million that is available this fiscal year. Of those 88 applications, 38 were from nonprofit organizations, 48 were from public entities, so cities and counties and other local municipalities, and 2 were from tribes. As part of our constant outreach, we've engaged over 1,500 participants through listening sessions, roundtable forum, and one-on-one meetings, as well as various webinars. If you can see the diagram on the right-hand side of your screen, most of the applications that we received were clustered in the metropolitan areas of California, specifically the Bay Area, and in Southern California, Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. What this pre-qualification round gave us an opportunity to do was recognize that we needed to do additional engagement in more rural areas of California and engage some other various types of participants, specifically tribes. Next slide, please. Slide 26, I believe. And part of that mission to foster more engagement with the potential applicants, DTSC has commenced on an initiative called the 100 Communities in 300 Days, with the goal of DTSC speaking with 100 communities directly within 300 days of starting this year. We've already started this listening tour and have reached 7 participants. mainly focused in our region where the Office of Brownfields is located down in Southern California. And we are planning to roll this out over the next few hundred days to other rural areas and areas in Northern California, with the goal of expanding knowledge on what brownfields are and reducing environmental uncertainties in communities, as well as creating familiarity with DTSC's resources that are available through either grants or loans. Next slide, please. This last slide is just a list of DTSC's ECRG resources. We have an ECRG webpage and the guidelines available on our website. Again, we have a Brownfields technical assistance provider, the Center for Creative Land Recycling, which I've linked here. And my email address is also available here if you have questions. I will also provide our generic email inbox, ecrginfo@dtsc.ca.gov, where you can ask any questions that you may have about the ECRG or Equitable Community Revitalization Grant. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. And I'm going to hand off the presentation to Rafat Abbasi to speak about the Discovery and Enforcement Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. My name is, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Rafat Abbasi. I'm Chief of the Discovery and Enforcement Program. Next slide, please. Consistent with the SB 158, the vision of the Discovery and Enforcement Program, as Grant indicated, to identify the sources of releases in vulnerable communities, conduct in a discovery to determine if the release has occurred, hold polluters responsible by using enforcement process, use state funds if polluters are not complying and or not economically viable, and then conduct all the necessary investigation and ensure that vulnerable communities are safe and are protected. Next slide, slide 30, please. The focus of the Discovery Enforcement Program is to reinvigorate Discovery Enforcement program that had not really existed in its current form. So we are really, really grateful to have this funding to be able to develop this program in DTSC. We are focusing right now on the dry cleaners. There are about 7,500 dry cleaners across the state. We are we're nibbling at 112 sites at a time. I'm going to get into that a little bit. And we are focusing on vulnerable communities with high cumulative environmental burden and proximity to the sensitive receptors. Next slide, please. Obviously, 7,500 sites, we cannot take them on right away. So we have a prioritization process. We start with 7,495 dry cleaning sites. We apply CalEnviroScreen scores of greater than 75 percentile. That's our first one of the primary criteria. Then we use proximity to the sensitive receptors, using 50 feet as a distance for the site to prioritize. And then for the year 2021 and 22, we have come up with 112 sites that we're going to do discovery on. We anticipate 50 to 60 of them get into a discovery investigation. Next slide, please. Where we are right now, we are finalizing contracts at this time. We're obviously building the program by hiring the most qualified people to run this program. We continue to build the program from ground up. By summer, we hope to finalize contracts, begin site discovery, start planning for 22-23, and we continue to build the program across the state. By fall of 2022 and 23, we continue the discovery process for year 2, and then we start our enforcement process for the sites that we have conducted discovery and investigation. Slide 33. I think that's probably it. I would like to introduce Ed Moreland, who is going to be presenting Technical Assistance Grants Program. Ed?
Thank you, Rafat. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ed Moreland, and I am a branch chief with DTSC, as well as the lead for of development for the Technical Assistance Grants Program. Tonight, I'd like to speak with you on a couple topics regarding the Technical Assistance Grants, which we also go by as TAG program, the TAG program, and we'll go from there. So next slide, please. So first of all, here are the major points regarding the technical assistance program. Really, the central point is to provide vulnerable communities with technical support to understand and contribute to our response actions. And this word response actions is very important, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. So what does that mean? And what it means is the intention is to provide services of a technical advisor to assist with the interpretation of information produced as part of these response actions. So what are these response actions? These response actions are things like site investigations, site cleanups, operation and maintenance of environmental remedies, things like that are under the regulatory authority of DTSC. So the key is to be able to provide this additional advisor to help communities to formulate meaningful responses to these response actions. A second portion of the TAG program, which we're in the early stages of forming right now, is to engage communities in conducting environmental sampling related to these response actions. And most of you, I'm sure, are aware of citizen science and community science. And that's the intention of this aspect of the TAG program. So this is in the early stages of development, like I've said, and we continue to work on that aspect and move the TAG program forward in that way. And consistent with the rest of the CVCI program, the intention is to really be consistent with the governor's initiative to ensure focus on areas with high cumulative environmental and socioeconomic impacts. Next slide, please. So where are we with the TAG program in the development? We're really fairly early on in the development stage of the program. We're in the stage of the initial framework and developing that initial framework. And speaking to that, we really want the input from stakeholders and community members. And to do this, we intend to hold a polling session in late spring of this year, late spring 2022, to get the input from the communities. So I encourage you strongly to check back with the CVCI website as to when this polling session will be scheduled. And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of this feedback that we want from the communities and from our stakeholders, as it's a key means of providing a listening session so we can modify the structure of this TAG program appropriately. So in end, we will then make modifications to the TAG program, probably in the time frame of late fall of 2022, based on the input from our stakeholders. So that's what I have with regard to status of the Technical Assistance Grants Program. At this point, I'd like to hand the discussion over to Mara Golo to talk about Community Benefits Agreements Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, and good evening, everyone. My name is Mara Golo, and I will be introducing DTSC's Community Benefits Agreement Program. Slide 37, please. So what is a Community Benefits Agreement? Community Benefits Agreement, or CBA, is an agreement between a project proponent and a community organization. It contains a set of commitments with a wide range of community benefits that the proponent agrees to provide as part of a project. DTSC aims to develop a CBA program to address the needs of communities impacted by a release or a potential release of hazardous material. We envision working with technical experts to develop this program and to help engage communities in negotiating a CBA as part of our cleanup process. Slide 38, please. Where are we in our development process? So currently, similar to TAG, we are also still in the early development step of information gathering and drafting our key concepts for the program. We plan on having our initial stakeholder consultations and workshops in the summer of 2022. And we will be developing our draft framework. We'll have that ready this fall, after which the formal public comment period will take place. We will also be providing updates on the CVCI website once the final workshop dates are set and when our draft documents will be made available for review. That's all I have for the CBA program, and I'll pass it on to Andres Martinez.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. My name is Andres Martinez, and I'm the program lead for the workforce program component for CDCI, the Cleanup and Vulnerable Communities Initiative. I'm also a supervisor for the Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs programs in the Office of Environmental Equity. Can you go to slide 40, please? The department is in a very unique position to engage with the communities that we serve through a program that offers skill training in the environmental remediation field and contribute to achieving economic justice in the communities that we work through training and employment opportunities. This workforce development program will seek to establish community workforce and training partnerships that will assist with developing strategies and create employable and sustainable jobs in the environmental remediation field. Ultimately, the purpose of this workforce development program will seek to identify employment opportunities in the work that DTSC oversees to train members of California's communities. We will regularly seek input from community stakeholders in the development and ongoing progress of the program to evaluate ongoing goals and opportunities to further engage with the communities that we serve. You can go to slide 41, please. Currently, we're organizing to develop internal strategies and a work plan that will establish the foundational requirements and processes to ensure that we can create paths for employment on DTSC's projects. We'll be reaching out to community workforce and training partners to develop our regional partnerships that will support our training, certification needs for those of our communities as they relate to employment support. We'll be looking to establish dates for workshops on this effort, so stay tuned. Our workforce and development program will also be coordinated directly with our internal partners from the Discovery and Enforcement program that you just heard as an initial regional job opportunity location on the work DTSC oversees, and also identify other opportunities to expand the workforce and development program into other DTSC projects. That concludes the update on workforce and development program. I can hand it now back to Chris, our facilitator, to take us into the next agenda item.
Thank you very much, Andres.
Thank you.
To provide an overview of recruitment events, we are joined by Aaron Robertson, Deputy Director of Administration. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chris. You've heard a lot tonight about the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities initiative, and DTSC is working to expand and diversify our workforce to meet the needs of that program. We're adding 80 new employees, more than 80 employees this year. We're adding more than 30 next year. And so we're holding a series of hiring fairs to reach out to the community and help folks understand the state process and to recruit new employees. On February 23rd, we held a hiring fair and were joined by 237 participants. Our agenda included an overview of DTSC's core programs and the department as a whole. We also had breakout groups where we broke down by jobs, and we had presentations and questions about the different jobs and the hiring process within DTSC in the state. And then we walked participants through how to navigate the state hiring process. We had as I said, we had a really good turnout, and everyone that participated in the hiring fair indicated that they were going to go back and apply for a job at DTSC. And we had them rate how well the program or the hiring fair, how we did, and they rated us 3.53 out of 4. We thought that's pretty good. And we're going to continue these hiring fairs. We're going to do them every quarter. And we have another one scheduled next, or we're planning this upcoming May. And I would invite any of you out there tonight who might be interested in joining our DTSC team to join us at that hiring fair in May to help us clean up your neighborhood. So there'll be more advertisement out there. We'll advertise on social media on our Facebook page, on LinkedIn, and through a number of other venues. And if there are other ways that you would like to hear about it, please let us know. Share with us how best we can communicate and connect with you so that you're aware of these opportunities as they come up. That's all I have, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you to all the CVCI managers. Project managers. I would like to move on to the next question and comment section. We will use the same system as we did before. Raise hands to ask your question aloud, and then type questions in the Q&A box for me to read. For anyone who may have joined us late, this slide shows how you can access the raised hand feature and the Q&A box. If you're dialing in, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. We will start asking if there are any questions in the Spanish audio line. Thank you very much, Brittany. I will now move to the participants that they raised their hand. The first person is Maricela Mares Alatorre. Please unmute yourself and you may ask your question.
She may have stepped away. We'll leave her hand up and go to the next.
Okay. Next person is Al Young. Al Young, can you please unmute and you may ask your question. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to next number, phone number ending in 985.
Press *6 to unmute.
Press *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Janet Johnson. I'm on unceded Chochenyo Ohlone land in Richmond. I'm here representing Sunflower Alliance and Richmond Shoreline Alliance. We are extremely troubled by the significant public health issues raised from toxic pollution at the Campus Bay Zeneca site on Richmond's southeast shoreline. 2 months without rain has enabled site work to progress, and we are increasingly disturbed by several pressing issues. The first is the inadequate air monitoring during site work. Existing air monitors are often broken and otherwise offline for hours, and real-time air monitoring data is not available online to the community. Community members are only getting data reports after a month or more. Chevron provides live online monitoring at their fence line 24/7. My question is, why can't DTSC require the contractors hired by Zeneca site owners to do the same? Second question, DTSC has chosen a cleanup remedy, alternative 3A, that removes only a small fraction, roughly 2%, of the more than 1/2 million cubic yards of contaminated soil. Their solution is to vent harmful VOCs, employ unproven bioremediation that will not address arsenic in any case, and arsenic is one of the most prevalent site contaminants, and then install a concrete cap. Multifamily homes proposed to be built there will have a lot of children. If the site is capped, they won't be touching soil there, but when they leave their front door, they'll be walking out on local streets and moving into the neighborhood. We know that the UC Field Station Marsh and surrounding area there has unremediated arsenic. My question, why hasn't DTSC given consideration to these other areas? Children are especially vulnerable to exposure to toxic chemicals. Their brains and bodies are still developing, and exposure to toxins during critical and sensitive windows of development can lead to illness during childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and across generations. Children absorb more toxic chemicals per unit of body weight than adults, and their shorter stature places them closer to the ground where pollutants concentrate. Moreover, they spend more time outdoors, are more active when outdoors, and are more likely to put their hands in their mouths. All these physiologic and behavioral characteristics of children make them highly vulnerable to pollution. Why will the DTSC be allowing families to live on a site where the deed restrictions prohibit schools for anyone under age 21, daycare centers for children or elders, hospitals, or contact with the soil? Number 4, regarding the cleanup remedy. The issue of the impact of 10 years of diesel trucks going from the site through Richmond neighborhoods is a red herring. And you use this excuse with communities all over the state when you defend inadequate cleanup plans. Toxic soil can be removed and treated locally. Also, there's a rail yard within a quarter mile of the site. Why can't DTSC use federal funding available and be more proactive in seeking out 21st century remedies? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. I would like to invite our panelists to weigh in on those questions, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenna, for those questions. I'm really glad that you're here tonight. It was good talking with you, earlier about some of these issues, and I would just, encourage you. I know that it's difficult, that you don't have a lot of time, but as much as you have to share with us, we just really enjoy making certain that we stay connected with you and with other people in the Richmond area as well. In terms of the air monitoring, let's talk. If there's a need for real time, it's going to depend on what types of contaminants, because not all contaminants can be, in fact, sampled and issued in real time. Some of them can, and we've done that at other sites. So absolutely, let's talk about that. In terms of the remedy decision, so there's a variety of factors that led us to choose the alternative that we did. And let me say it like this. There are two things that are immutable. There are two things that a cleanup must do. We will not approve a cleanup unless these factors are met. First of all, it has to be protective of public health and the environment. Secondly, it's got to comply with all federal, state, and local requirements. Our selection of that cleanup alternative did both of those things. Second, on the truck trips, it is a fact that 65,000 truck trips over 10 years, mind you, that doesn't include the heavy equipment on site, will increase smog-forming pollution and other cancer-causing chemicals in an airshed that is already not meeting health-based standards. People in Richmond are already living in an airshed where it's not healthy to breathe the air. Adding to that, over a 10-year period with the cleanup, it's a fact that we had to consider. Instead, we chose one that had about 1,050 truck trips or so and could be done in 3 years. There are other things that we considered too. Having heavy equipment in the area, doing that work over that long of a period of time increases risk to workers. It increases traffic, the potential for traffic fatalities. There's a variety of different things that we considered when we reached that decision. And we've had this discussion before. I mean, I don't think that I'm telling you anything new. I'm just trying to be very clear that it was a difficult decision and that we considered a whole variety of factors when we reached it. In terms of the other areas, I know that you and Ian have been talking. I'm more than happy to take part in those discussions. The last thing that I'd say is with respect to children's health, California has tremendously strong protections. We look at the most vulnerable person or the most vulnerable endpoint. Sometimes it could be wildlife, but we look at the most vulnerable person generally and set our standards to protect them. In terms of the different land use controls that you're talking about, there was a decision made a while ago, and you referenced this, that the land use controls on the site should basically align with local government. So this is what we were talking about when we last spoke. So the land use controls that are on the site, on the Zeneca site, are more protective for schools, for hospitals, than what we would normally do. We would normally say, absolutely, yes, go ahead. You can put hospitals on there, you can put schools on there. A decision was made in the past, and we've decided not to lessen those protections at this point. Going forward, we would obviously work in collaboration with local people as well as local government officials. If it makes sense to at some point not have those land use controls on, then we would reach that decision, when we had to. But we decided not to roll back those protections when we issued the decision, even though it would be protective for those uses. So let's catch up with Ian and Nalin, and we can go through the other issues that you mentioned.
Thank you very much, Grant. I'd like to move on to the next caller, Comfort Agara. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Comfort Agara. Okay, we'll move on to the next person. Stephen Goodale. You may unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Am I coming through?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So thanks very much for having this event. This is the first time we've been able to attend a DTSC presentation. So we really appreciate it. We're learning a lot. And it's nice to put names to faces and voices to faces and all that. So my question is, or actually, well, it's a question and a statement too. We have recently kind of become aware of how sea level rise will affect the bay water levels and how high they are, and how the bay water levels will affect the groundwater and the water table. And as the groundwater rises, it's projected to infiltrate something like 1,100 legacy contamination sites throughout the Bay Area, which is potentially terrifying if those toxins are suddenly mobilized and are able to leach out into the surrounding bay waters and or communities near them. So my question is, does the DTSC have a plan to address this issue? Second, if you do have a plan, or if the DTSC does have a plan to address this issue, can you tell us the plan and or where we can go to find out more information about that plan? And then third, also, are sites ranked in order of importance? And what is the criteria for ranking sites? And I hope that made sense. This is my first time asking the DTSC anything. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We really appreciate your question. Grant, would you like to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are great questions, Mr. Goodale. I'm really glad that you asked them. This is an extremely important issue, and we're at the cutting edge of this issue. In terms of the plan, our plan is really there's two phases to it. The first is to issue guidance to project managers. Those are the people who are responsible for overseeing the sites to make certain that the protectiveness of the cleanups are maintained. We will issue guidance to them that will make certain that we're making consistent decisions across the state on sea level rise issues. So we're using the same data, we use the same criteria, even though it would be a site-specific decision. The second guidance that we'll issue, phase 2, is guidance on really how to address the impacts of sea level rise in a more consistent fashion. Think of it as kind of rule of thumbs, guidance that tells people in general you want to use this type of action for this type of sea level rise for this type of site. Understanding that each site is very, very unique. We're also working with US EPA and regional boards who are going through the same process. This is something that is not unique to just DTSC here in California. Where to get more information? We will be holding public meetings when we issue the guidance to get public input. So please, I know this is that your time is very valuable, but please check back in on DTSC's website and take a look for sea level rise guidance meetings. The third is ranked sites. We are developing a GIS system that will look at the sites that are impacted. We want to focus on sites not just from sea level rise, but also from groundwater influenced by sea level rise. And yeah, we will rank different types of sites differently. So, for example, when a responsible party owns it, we will be ordering them to do vulnerability assessments and to do other actions if it would sea level rise would impact the protectiveness of a remedy. There's just a variety of different types of sites that we work on. So, but yeah, we will have to prioritize because there's limited resources and limited time in which to actually plan and implement the things that will need to occur in order to maintain the protectiveness of the remedies. I hope that answers the questions that you posed.
Thank you very much, Grant. We will next is Cynthia Babbage. Can you please unmute yourself so you may ask your question?
Yes, I don't really have a question, but I have comments on the presentations and opening remarks that were shared today. I see that the agency is, moving forward with work plans and developing new work plans and new divisions. And a lot of us that have been doing this for a really long time feel like we're being left way back in a dust cloud. The issues that we've raised over and over, many of them have been discussed tonight, about permitting hazardous waste, reducing hazardous waste. You guys, are moving forward with a bunch of money that you got from the taxpayers through legislation on these attempted cleanups of contaminated sites. And in almost all of these instances, the cart is just way before the horse. These things are all intertwined, just like the VSP, and how that plays into permits. And you can't just go down in all these different paths without looking at the interconnectivity. And I know you're not, because these would be put in a different order. So many of us, like many of the newcomers on the line tonight, and I've heard from all the staff saying how you want to connect with us and input is important, but that's not what's happening. And for me, it's like super frustrating. I used to have a lot of faith in the DTSC, and I'm really do want to have that. I think for my community, we deal with the EPA, federal EPA, and you're supposed to be our counterbalance, and you're not. And, what I see with the technical assistance that you hired, the Creative Land Recycling Center, I've been to their conferences before. And what they teach people is how you bury the toxic waste under the parking lot so many feet down, because then it won't become a problem. So what I've been seeing now in the last 6 months, and maybe even a little longer, and especially from you, Grant, when I hear you talk about how you're making decisions about whether sites get cleaned up or contained, that's not what we want. Why do you guys keep thinking that you get to make all of the decisions about where we live? These are bad decisions. And so you can say how you're including EJ and all of that, and you might fool some of the new people, but you're not fooling us. And here we sit waiting in the dust, hoping to have some kind of meaningful dialogue with your agency. And, we can't even get Meredith to connect with us. You've promised Grant to follow up with me several times, and that hasn't happened. I really like the guy's comment about, what information that we can collect would you, approve of and take as credible, because it sure would be a lot faster for us to do some fundraising and clean up our own sites. So even though I'm sure many of you feel like I only have harsh things to say, I'm probably one of the harder working community people ready to roll up my sleeves and to help you sort through these problems. But you don't give us a seat at the table. We have individual little conversations with you, and we don't get to sit down there and talk the whole thing through to at least the point where we feel like we've been heard. So I don't know if the agency even has the will to fix that or not. And maybe all I'm just saying is, you're not fooling everybody. And it's very sad. It's very hurtful. My community will continue to suffer because of your lack of will to really protect us. So I will close by saying, everybody knows my number. You know where I'm at. I do really care about not just my community, but, Kettleman City. That's why we still have a lot of our hazardous waste in our neighborhood, because we're not going to send it to Kettleman City. So at least come up with a way where you hear us and you value that opinion. Like you say, that's what you're trying to do. So, I appreciate your time. It's been very agonizing for me to hear you having so many accolades when we feel so differently about it.
Thank you very much, Cynthia Babbage. Would any of our panelists like to respond to her comments?
I'll just say that, Cynthia, I hear you. I have reached out and asked to meet. And I know that you guys are extremely busy working on a tremendous number of things. I will reach out again. And if you guys have time, absolutely. Let's meet, let's talk. 100%. I know you didn't ask any questions, so I don't want to impose my, comments on what your comments were, but 100%. I'll reach out again. If you guys want to meet, let's meet.
Thank you very much, Grant. I'd like to move on to Jennifer Kalt. You may unmute yourself so you may ask your question or comment.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my comments. My name is Jennifer Kalt. I'm the director of Humboldt Baykeeper here in Northern California. First, I would like to commend you on the live Spanish interpretation. I attend many, many government agency hearings, and I have not encountered that yet. So it's a great chance for me to practice my Spanish, which I know very little of. But I'd like to request that you hold a listening session in Humboldt County. That's my first, well, it's not really a question, it's a request. Our top priority is the McNamara and Peep site, which is a former lumber mill in the Blue Lake area that used the dioxin-containing wood preservative called pentachlorophenol that was banned in 1987, but it continues to contaminate groundwater and surface water, not just on the site itself, but beyond the site. These toxic chemicals have moved beyond the cap that was installed in 1998, as well as off the site and into a private domestic well on adjacent property. DTSC has been the responsible party, I guess is what you would call yourselves, for this site since the 1990s when the lumber mill went bankrupt. I believe that's when your role as responsible party started. But none of the domestic wells in the area have been tested until Baykeeper used funding from a private foundation to sample a well that's just 200 feet away from the cap. And indeed, it is contaminated with not only this chemical that was banned in 1987, but also with 2 congeners of dioxins. The site was first declared an imminent and substantial endangerment in 2008, and the CAP was decertified in 2018, and a new remedial action plan was scheduled for 2019, but that has not been done yet, despite the fact that surface water from the site drains to a stream just 1 mile above the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District's intake wells that provide drinking water supplies to 2/3 of Humboldt County residents. We've been told that DTSC only has $210,000 for site assessment. And what I would like to know is how funding can be allocated, not just for site assessment, but for remediation of the site before the dioxins make it to the river and our drinking water source. It's really impressive how much money DTSC has to grant to communities for cleanup and enforcement, but it doesn't seem like this site really fits into any of those categories. And my question to you is there a way to fit this site into those categories? And if not, how can we get money allocated to really clean up this site as soon as possible? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Grant, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. In terms of a listening session, yeah, we can set something up. I'll talk with the division chief for Northern California, and we can get something set up. In terms of the funding for the cleanup of the site, it's an orphan site, so we're not a responsible party. We took it over because we are a state agency that is provided with funds to clean up contamination, investigate contamination, et cetera, when there is no responsible party that can pay for the cleanup or investigation. I will take a look at what available funds are being put out for McNamara and Peep. I know it came up, I think 2 or 3 times last year in discussions with local authorities. And I know that we were attempting to find more money. I don't have that information at my fingertips. But Jennifer, I will get back to you, or Nalene will get back to you, the division chief for Northern California, and we'll let you know about the available funds, and also about the listening session.
Thank you very much, Grant. We'll move on to the Q&A box. We have a question from Rubina Sewell. Please share the full addresses and locations of the 113 dry cleaners DTSC has selected, and what was your process of selecting these specific sites?
Rafa, do you want to take the process that was used to select this initial list of sites? We haven't finalized it, but
I can take that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for that question, Rubina. What we are using is, as you know, this program is focused on vulnerable communities. So we're using Cal EnviroScreen scores. As I mentioned in my presentation, anything greater than 75th percentile is being used for now to select sites. And then the other criteria, the other primary criteria we are using is proximity of this site to sensitive receptors. We are using 50 feet right now as a second criteria to select sites. So we came up with 112 sites. That is something the department can manage on an annual basis. Those were the criteria we used. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Rafat, and thank you very much, Rubina, for your question. I'd like to move on to the next question. How does DTSC recommend that citizen science be carried out in dealing with radioactive, carcinogenic, and teratogenic pollutants? Would anyone like to, would any of our panelists like to weigh in on that question?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll go ahead and take that one. Sally, thanks very much for that question. It's a great question. It's one that's right on top of our list in terms of priorities to deal with. For the citizen science aspect of this, the foremost aspect of collecting data is we need to protect the citizens from the hazards that these contaminants portray or convey. So, we're going to develop programs by which some sampling can occur, but in safe zones, i.e., we obviously are not going to ask people to go to a hazardous waste site and collect soil samples when they haven't been trained appropriately or have the right personal protective gear. But other aspects of the program that we think may be appropriate are collecting air samples in their neighborhoods where there's concern about site contaminants in the air escaping during the remediation process. So, we're grappling with that right now, but foremost on our list is to keep the citizen scientists safe during that process. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Sally. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and comments. And I will move on to Julia Dowell. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Julia Dowell. I'm with Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice, calling in from unceded Chochenyo Ohlone land. This is a question respectfully not for Grant Cope, but for Dr. Meredith Williams. It's documented that many of the current cleanup plans at contaminated sites on the San Francisco Bay shoreline do not take into account the latest California Coastal Commission's sea level rise projections of up to 7.5 feet by 2100. At the December regional workshop on sea level rise and contamination, DTSC's Grant Cope committed to utilizing the latest science in all DTSC's cleanup plans, and then tried to backtrack a few weeks later in a follow-up meeting. Dr. Meredith Williams, you confirmed in an email to Green Action that DTSC will be using the latest science in all cleanup plans. Dr. Williams, my question is, will you respond now for the record? Will DTSC commit to reopening and improving cleanup plans to ensure that all site cleanup plans incorporate the latest sea level rise projections and groundwater rise projections based on the latest science? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. May we have your input, Dr. Williams?
Julia, thank you for the question, and thank you for putting sea level rise at the fore through the workshops and all the work you did to make those workshops, bring visibility to the challenges. So we, as Grant laid out our process for developing new guidance, we also have existing processes for reviewing any cleanup remedies that are in place to see whether or not they need to be revisited. And I will say again, we always rely on the best available science, and that will not change. Climate change is impacting all of us, and we have to move faster. We're not going to catch up to it, but we do definitely have to move faster, think bigger, and be more aggressive about how we respond to climate change. I think the discussion earlier about the impact of sea level rise on groundwater and increases in groundwater really highlights the risk that's posed, especially around the San Francisco Bay. So we are going to, I can't say we're going to open every site. I'm not going to make a blanket commitment to open every single site for revisiting for sea level rise, but we need to look at them, look at the vulnerability of those sites, look at what assumptions went into the original cleanup with regard to sea level rise, and really make sure that whatever remedies are in place are adequate given what we know about the threats and the magnitude of the threats, which are bigger. They are bigger than I'm sure the estimates for some of the cleanup sites that were addressed 10 years ago. So I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll have a chance to talk about this. And we'll be in discussion and continue to talk about the department's response to sea level rise using the forecasts that are consistent with the action plan that was published by the Ocean Protection Council just recently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, and thank you very much, Julia, for your question. I'd like to thank everyone for your questions and comments. At this time, we will move to our meeting wrap. Slide 28, please. A quarterly public forum planning team welcomes your comments, questions, and suggestions on how we can continuously improve this space for you all. We invite you to complete post-meeting survey and to visit our webpage to view current and past forum information. The web address is www.dtsc.ca.gov/public forums. To be notified of our next quarterly public forum, please subscribe to our e-list at www.dtsc.ca.gov/DTSC-E-lists and scroll to DTSC public meetings and click on subscribe. You can also email us directly at dtsc.publicmeeting@dtsc.ca.gov. We'll post all of this information for you in the chat. Slide 29, please. That concludes our meeting for tonight. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be with us. With everything going on in the world, we understand that you may be inundated with virtual meetings, and we appreciate your presence. As a reminder, the meeting materials included the chat text will be posted by Friday, March 11th to the quarterly public forum webpage at www.dtsc.gov/public forums. Good night, stay safe, and be well.